Welcome, everybody. This is Buck Joffrey with the Wealth Formula Podcast. This week is 4th of July week. So happy 4th of July. I don't know if you're listening to it on the 4th of July, but happy 4th of July nonetheless. It's a great time of the year. It's one to reflect on how lucky we are to be part of the United States of America, which makes your life a lot easier when it comes to the idea of getting rich. And it's something to take heart and something to think of. But anyway, on with the show here. Now, first, I'd like to remind you again, there is a website there called wealthformula.com. You might be familiar, and there's all sorts of extra resources to go check out there. I encourage you to do that. You can also download 7 Secrets of Eternal Wealth, my Amazon bestseller. You can also simply do that by texting me at 44222 and typing Wealth Formula, one word. Again, that's 44222, Wealth Formula, one word. Now, one other thing that's super cool that I think a lot of people have already taken advantage of is, I've sort of hit the new age, I have an app. I have a Wealth Formula app that you can get on Stitcher, iTunes, all the usual places that you buy apps, right? And the cool thing about it is that you can, you can easily download. You don't have to go to your podcast thing and flip on Wealth Formula Podcast, try to find it anymore. You can go there. You have all the podcasts right there. You may or may not know this, but we do all these on video as well. So you can watch if you like, because it's connected to the YouTube channel. If you are a member of Wealth Formula Network, you can also connect directly to the forum through there. You can even leave me video, audio, comments, questions for an Ask Buck episode. It is full of fun stuff. So check it out. Go to the App Store and get that Wealth Formula app. Speaking of the forum, so there's this whole thing called the Wealth Formula Network, which effectively is the mastermind of Wealth Formula. And it includes, being part of Wealth Formula Network implies that you have access to the course that I did that has an incredible lineup of people, including the likes of the real estate guys, Tom Wheelwright, Kevin Day, Dean Graziosi, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you also have access to each other vis-a-vis the Wealth Formula Network forum. And then probably the thing that's been the most popular is a bi-weekly mastermind call. So this is, I'm sorry, folks, this is dirt cheap, so you should check it out, wealthformularoadmap.com. It's the enormous amount of, for what you get is an unbelievable value. So check that out, wealthformularoadmap.com, and join us. I mean, this mastermind needs you, right? Or at least maybe you need us. I don't know. But anyway, there's a tremendous value in having the collective intelligence of this group. I have to tell you that I've learned things on these calls myself, and you really shouldn't miss out. And so anyway, on with today's topic, which is burnout. Okay, now burnout, it's a good time to think about this. Holiday comes around. Are you one of those people who's just like, oh, thank goodness it is, I'm off work for a few days. I'm so happy about that, As you know, I left medicine entirely it's been about a year ago. I mean, for the most part, I was doing like a day a week in my businesses up in Chicago for a while, but I was mentally out of this a while ago. And now in Chicago, I still have a couple of these medical-related businesses that they run without me. But without question, I have moved on. I have gone another route. All of my physical and emotional energy are devoted to things outside of medicine, like real estate and life settlements and all these kinds of fun things, even cryptocurrency. Why? Well, I used to think it was the reason that I was out of medicine and into these other things is that maybe I have a little bit of what they call attention deficit disorder. And that may be the case. I don't know. Maybe. I probably do. Most entrepreneurs do. Sort of that been there, done that attitude. It seems like every 5 years I need to explore, reinvent myself, that kind of thing. Um, of course, that doesn't include my wife. She and I have been married now for 10 years. It's going to be 10 years in a couple days here. And anyway, the thing is, when I think back to when I started not enjoying medicine, the frightening thing is it actually started in residency. And it actually started out in my first year of surgical internship. Talk about going way back. I mean, geez, I haven't even started and I was already burned out. And it's sad because, I was a highly, highly, highly motivated medical student. I was driven to succeed. And back then, my professors loved me in part because I was a big kiss ass. But then I started a neurosurgery residency and, well, I sort of lost my mojo. What do I mean by that? Well, I experienced the following: physical and emotional exhaustion, cynicism and detachment, feelings of ineffectiveness and lack of accomplishment. All right, if you haven't figured it out, I just heisted these descriptions from a psychology journal that used these particular definitions to describe someone who is suffering from burnout. Okay, so I was burned out. The physical, okay, so going back again to these three things, there was the physical and emotional exhaustion. Well, back then, I just figured it was because I was working 100 hours a week. I was a neurosurgery intern and neurosurgery resident year 2. And this was before they had this thing called the 80-hour work week. Those of you doctors out there who know what I'm talking about, they used to have this, unlimited. You could just work residents forever, and you pay them like, $30,000 a year. My first year in internship, I made $35,000 that year. It was like 2002, and I worked easily 100 hours a week. So you do the math; it's somewhere under minimum wage. But anyway, pretty soon, there was some bad press, and they had this work week called an 80-hour work week, which no one really enforced anyway. But that's the history of that. So anyway, physical and emotional exhaustion, that took care of that one. Now, cynicism and detachment, that was the other part of the definition of burnout. Now, this is horrible, right? I was surrounded by death in the neurosurgical ICU. When a patient died, honestly, it wasn't sad. It was an inconvenience. I found the paperwork irritating, and it was difficult to be truly compassionate to families. Now, as terrible as that sounds, it's the truth. I hate to say it, but that's the person I had become, right? I mean, this is what you're dealing in day out. It's hard to you do anything like that on an ongoing basis, and you're completely desensitized, right? Boy, I could tell you stories, and maybe one day you can ask me about them, but it gets kind of crazy. So that's number 2, cynicism and detachment. Number 3, feelings of ineffectiveness and lack of accomplishment. Well, as for feeling ineffective and lack of accomplishment, well, you just need a couple of unsupportive senior residents or chief residents to make you feel like crap. Surgical training, in most cases, for those people who don't know this, is quite hierarchical. It's just the way it is most of the time. And I found that not all, but a lot of surgical residents, and particularly in my program, were of the kiss up, kick down variety. In other words, they always tried to, make themselves look good, and they kind of like to beat up on the junior folks, and kind of step on them. I hated it. And especially if you consider who I am now, it's incredibly independent entrepreneurial spirit. This was the worst thing that could ever ever happen to me in the nature of who I am. That's why sometimes I think if you are a really good surgical resident in a hierarchical program, you're probably not an entrepreneur. I mean, you may be, but I don't know how those two become compatible. Anyway, remarkably, so that's how I define myself when I look back, and it looks like I guess I was just burned out, or maybe I just happened to fit those things. Remarkably, despite this, and despite the fact that it was first year of my residency of 7 years of surgical training, despite that, I finished and I graduated, and I went on to become a full-fledged non-resident, attending surgeon, which of course I didn't do for that long. But I was dissatisfied, and it was all of this feeling of burnout that ultimately led to my dissatisfaction. And it also, frankly, made it really easy for me to go in another direction. And that's kind of what I was getting at when I said, well, if you were a good surgical resident, you probably were not going to be an entrepreneur because you could deal with it. I hated it so much that I was looking for something else, another direction. Now, did I have to go to another direction? Was that the only way for me to feel better? Well, I always thought so at the time. But if you look at burnout, as I have described it with these clinical descriptions, as a kind of disorder like depression or maybe a back problem, a literal pain in the ass, then maybe there was a way to not give it all up and start over. Not that I look back and think that I wish I could, but maybe there was a way. But I did start over. But it was easy for me to do that. Easier for me to do that than most. First of all, I didn't have much in the way of responsibilities when I first started my entrepreneurial life. My first daughter was a baby, and my wife and I didn't even own a house. We were renting. I think our rent was maybe $1,500 a month, which was, seemed like it wasn't that much, right? I mean, for a family, but especially considering, the kinds of things that we're paying for now. But, well, gosh, we just didn't have much to worry about in terms of expenses. And, I didn't have to worry about, paying for college. I mean, because my daughter was only like 6 months old. So I figured I had at least 17 years to figure that one out. But for others, this idea that you can't escape from that, the golden handcuffs of a high-paid job and responsibilities like paying for mortgage and for private school and colleges make burnout a particularly devastating problem because, you're in silent desperation, right? You can't do anything about it. And in that case, if you are in that position, or maybe somebody is in that position, it's good to know that that you can look at this problem as a clinical diagnosis, one that you can possibly, like any other ailment, treat the affliction without having to give it all up, amputate the career, so to speak. Maybe you can actually just simply continue with the work that you're doing, but not be miserable, right? So burnout is a real problem for people who are highly successful and well paid. But, most people have little sympathy for high-paid professionals making $300,000 per year feeling burned out. I mean, people look at this demographic, our demographic, and think, why are you complaining? I mean, I'm like, I make like, $50,000 a year and I can't pay my bills. You should be happy. Well, everybody's got their thing, right? Everybody's got their problems that they have to deal with. But the fact that people have this attitude makes people less likely to come out and actually look for, a way to help themselves. And that makes it even more difficult to deal with because you might feel like it's not okay to admit that you're not actually happy. But the reality is at every level, again, people deal with the same junk, right? We're all human. We all have problems. We all have things that make us unhappy. And maybe what's going on with you, or maybe somebody is maybe you're just burned out. Maybe you can help somebody with this or yourself with this kind of topic and coming to grips with this. The good news is that there's help out there, just like there is for any other ailment. And there's not a reason to just feel like you have to be miserable for good anymore. And my guest today on Wealth Formula Podcast, we're going to take a little step back and get a little touchy-feely here because we're talking about burnout. And my guest today is Diane Ansari-Wynn. She is a board-certified anesthesiologist who went through burnout herself and has now become an expert on helping other physicians identify and cope with burnout. Now, of course, burnout affects everyone. And even though Diane works primarily with physicians, I think this is an important topic. If it's not affecting you, it may very well be affecting somebody around you if you live in this whole sort of this demographic, this highly specialized, high-paid demographic. So you may be able to help yourself. You may be able to help somebody else. Make sure you tune in. And when we come back, we're going to have Dr. Ansari-Wynn tell us all about burnout. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today, my guest on Wealth Formula Podcast is Dr. Diane Ansari-Wynn. She was a practicing anesthesiologist when she ultimately burned out in 2012. And after 15 years of practice, she gave it up to pursue a happy and fulfilled, purpose-driven life. And now she coaches other doctors going through burnout and has her own podcast called Doctor's Life, which really could be called the high-achieving professional's life, as these problems are common to all people who are really in that situation. But please welcome Diane to the show. Welcome.
Hi, Buck. It's great to see you.
Good. So, welcome. And so take us back, Diane, back to pre-professional days. And, why did you decide to become a doctor and anesthesiologist in the first place? And then what changed?
I love talking about this. I had wanted to become a doctor long ago. I was probably about 12 or 13 years old. And I have a cousin that's about 10 years older than me. And he's a family medicine doc. He trained at Stanford. And he was ahead of me and always encouraged me to go into medicine. I got to follow him around. And it was really cool. But initially, I didn't think I would really become a doctor. I just watched him and thought what he did was cool. But then when I was in high school, I must have been 13 or so. I did an assessment test and it said, well, you could become a priest or you could become a counselor or you could become a doctor. So
right.
I thought, shoot, I can do that. So I never really gave it up. There was a point at which I was at University of Michigan and I went there for undergraduate and medical school, actually a combined degree in medicine and public health. And when I first started there, I got there and I hit a kind of a stall. I was doing well in my other classes, but I was taking this calculus class and it just really, I wasn't doing well in it at all. And that was not, what I would usually do. I was used to being, like most of us, high achieving people, right? Used to being at the top of my class.
Sure.
And so I got discouraged and thought, well, maybe I'll do nurse practitioner or something. Just something different. I couldn't do it.
Right.
And then I just regained my purpose again after talking with my parents and talking with my cousin who's been mentoring me throughout my career and got back on track. So how I got so that was it's kind of a theme where I think I'm going to do something and then I kind of think maybe I won't, and then reset and get back on track. So I went to medical school straight from undergrad to med school. A lot of people can't do that these days, or don't do that these days.
Yeah.
You take gap years and stuff.
Sure.
But I went straight in, and then after a couple of years, I started feeling kind of tired. Like I thought, gosh, I'd already gone straight through, and I had finished high school a grade early, so I was relatively young, and thought, gosh, I'm not so sure, I want to go straight into clinical. So that's when I took what was supposed to be like a year that wasn't as busy, and got a master's degree in public health and health behavior and health education.
Typical doctor, right? Let me
Right? Like,
just
oh, I'll
take a
just take
year
time
off
off
and get a
and
master's
go to
degree as a
grad
break,
school.
right? Yeah, instead of like traveling the world or like
Right,
whatever, you're
right.
just like, I'll
Yeah,
just get a
well,
master's
it's
degree.
you
Sure.
we're talking about you like to talk about wealth, and so one of the things I kept in mind was, well, what's going to happen to my student loans if I take a year
Yeah,
off?
yeah,
So
sure,
I'm
sure.
going to just keep going. So then I was thinking I was going to be a pediatrician. So after medical school, I went into residency in pediatrics. And about October of that year, I realized that pediatrics was not going to be for me.
Ah,
I was actually in Chicago at the old Children's Memorial, which is associated with
yeah,
Northwestern.
yeah, yeah.
And I hadn't actually done anesthesia before, but I talked with my fiance, who's my husband now, who's also in med school, and we kind of just went through my strengths and what I like to do. And I liked that high energy kind of work. I liked
Yeah.
being in the ER. So I thought, well, I'll try anesthesia and see. So I actually took my application to another residency program
Uh-huh.
that was in my neighborhood at Illinois Masonic. And I was just dropping off the application, but by the time I finished, they'd offered me a tour, and I spoke with the residency program director, and I got offered
Wow.
a
Okay.
position. So I took
All right.
it. And that was really a good fit for me,
Uh-huh.
anesthesia. I liked the intensity of it. I liked working on a team. You're ENT doc, so you know what it's like to work on a team together with people that you know, like, and trust,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
doing good things, amazing
Right.
things.
So where did
So
the burnout come in?
yeah, so I did that for about 15 years, and probably about year 10, I started thinking, gosh, is this all there is? Is this all I'm going to be doing for the next 20 years?
Yeah.
And went another couple, thought, oh, it's just because I have young kids and have a husband and stuff. You don't really look at it that deeply because you're too busy working. But then a couple years later, as just like, this is not going away. I'm not shaking this. So I tried to get help and support, which I did to some degree, but eventually I decided that I needed to go ahead and leave medicine. So about maybe 2 years before I actually left, I started my exit strategy, because I was paying the mortgage and private school, and
Yeah.
as you talk
Yeah.
about the golden handcuffs.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I had to come up with the strategy so that I could I felt like I could afford to leave
Yeah.
medicine. Of course, I wasn't familiar with some of the techniques that you
Yeah.
teach,
Sure. Sure.
that I've had the opportunity to study. But so that's my story in a
What was
very,
it?
very
What was
small
the root of the
nutshell.
burnout? Because when you talk about, ultimately, that's one of the things that you really focus on, right? With health
Yeah,
professionals and
yeah.
people. So what is burnout? What do you think it is? With your experience of all these people, your own experience, what exactly is it?
That's a good question. You know, what I think burnout is there's there's a definition of burnout, more traditional definition of burnout, where they're talking about that there's components of culture, that especially in medicine, that the culture of medicine doesn't support self-care and self-actualization, and the institutions don't support it. And then as physicians, we don't really take into account our own self care, our own humanity, and our own self actualization in our work. And basically, I think at the core of it is a disconnect between who you are as a person and how you're functioning in your work. So if you're looking at what you do as being the most important thing, being your work, and you're not taking into account who you are, which is your purpose and what's most important to you, your relationships, your health, um, your finances as well. If you're not taking all those dimensions into account, then you're going to end up burned out. Because half of docs burn out, and half, statistically, and half of docs don't. So it's not like being a doctor means that you're going to burn out.
Does burnout mean quitting, or when you use the
No.
statistic?
Well, I don't think so. I think there's solutions to burnout, right? And what I coach docs on are the solutions to burnout, which is primarily rooted in self-care. So it's taking care of yourself, in the dimension, like social dimension, which is relationships. There's taking care of your body. There's taking care of your emotions or your emotional health. There's also your mental health that's really important. And so to take all of those things into account, including inspiration, things that inspire you, where is your heart? Where is your purpose?
Yeah.
Those things are critical in being anyone. I mean, it's, we're talking about being a doctor here, but just being a self-actualized human being, joyful.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it sounds like it to me. It sounds a lot like a midlife crisis, right? I mean that because I think that and I say that just as a
reference,
because
yes.
that's what people talk about with midlife crises, right? You just kind of start looking at what you're doing, and you're not really understanding am I going to really do this the rest of my life? Is this it? Right?
Yeah. Interestingly, that is a really nice parallel. And the funny thing is, though, with the burnout shows up with doctors. It can show up as early as medical school. So maybe, you have like a early midlife crisis, so to speak, when you're in your 20s or in your 30s.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's an age thing necessarily.
Exactly.
I think the point is when you start, especially if you think about it in terms of professionals who are going to professional school, whether it's engineers, lawyers, etc. They tend to be people who've been really pounding the pavement in terms of academics for a very, very long time, and there's always a carrot, right? There's always something you're striving for. And then one day you're actually there and you don't have anything you're really striving for anymore. And then you're like, wait a second. When I was in high school, I wanted to go to college and do well. And I wanted to do college. I wanted to go to medical school or law school. And then I wanted to get into the best residency, or I wanted to be in the best firm. And then I want to be in this fancy hospital or whatever. And then you're there, and then all of a sudden, okay, so now do this for 40 years and die, right? I mean, so anywhere along the path, you can potentially say, well, gosh, I'm here, I'm doing kind of what I thought I'd do, but where is this headed, and is this really all it? I mean, so that, to me, and I can say that from personal experience, I've kind of, I seem to have that pivot every 5 years, no matter what I do. So,
oh yeah. Well, I think you've hit it on the head, and it's kind of what I was alluding to before, which is that if you're focused on the doing, what am I doing, and looking at doing things as a way to be fulfilled in life, and you're not paying attention to who you are and what you're doing.
Right.
You can go through the mechanics. And so that can lead to burnout, I think, because you're externally focused, and all of your rewards are coming from external rewards.
Yeah.
And it's actually like exactly backwards if you consider it. I was talking with a psychologist who wrote a book called the Me Factor. It's actually a book that's written about burnout, and it's tailored for men.
Uh-huh.
And what he used was, if you look at your life, you can look at it in terms of a target, like a target that you shoot arrows at. You put yourself in the middle, and then your relationships with your spouse and your family, and then the next ring would be your relationships with others, and then your hobbies and the things that you like to do, and then work is actually on the outside. And I think that's pretty accurate, actually. That if your work fulfills you, then that's one thing. But if you're looking for work to just give you stuff, and you're not looking for what you can give and what you can get out of your work personally, then no matter what you do, whether you're a doctor, lawyer,
Yeah.
investor, whatever you're doing, you're going to run into that.
Yeah, I think that's
Because if
true.
you're asking yourself always, what's in it for me? Instead of like, how is it going to grow me? What is it going to do for me as a human being? How can I contribute? Then it's going to end up empty.
Right. So, sometimes I say that, one of the keys to happiness is figuring out what your mission in life is and actually spending your time trying to do that. And part of that may be identifying the thing that you would do every day if you could,
Mm-hmm.
and make that the thing that you do every day. And I'm not talking about playing golf, because a lot of people say, "Oh, I just play golf." Well, you get pretty bored pretty quickly. And I can tell you from personal experience that boredom is a problem that not a lot of people get to, I think, experience this whole, like, I can retire, but now I'm bored. There's got to be more. And that's been actually that's more what I experienced, which was, it's still a work in progress. But, so you mentioned a little bit about the factors of health and fitness playing into this. I personally believe that all thoughts and emotions are ultimately just physiology, right? I mean, you and I both know that we see people all the time who seem to be happy and content all the time, right? No matter what, you're like, what's so great about today? They're always happy. Starts to piss you off, right? And then there's people who are dark and brooding, and it just seems like nothing's ever good enough, and it just seems like there's always something that could be wrong with the situation. And in my mind, as a physician, I've sort of personally experienced this, where I've had moments of like, I'm really happy right now. Why am I really happy? And it occurs to me, this is physiology. This is not necessarily psychology. What do you make of that? Do you think, to me, that's the thing that I'm getting to, starting to conclude, is that we're all like these, we're people obviously who've got complex chemistry and physiology, but all these things that we try to break down into psychology and figuring out solutions. A lot of it's to, maybe if I could just alter my physiology somehow, that really that's what I need to be focusing on, and psychology will come with for the ride.
Well, that's an interesting thought. There's a couple things that I want to comment on there. One is that, you're absolutely right. That's the whole idea, behind psychoactive medications, food altering drugs.
You're right. And to be clear, I'm not advocating that is
that.
the ultimate cure is just to start, drinking all the time.
Smoke weed or whatever,
Right.
So you live in California, and I used to live in Colorado. So. But the cool thing is that I agree with you that part of our emotions do come from physiology. Sometimes we create these loops, right? Where if our heart is beating fast, right, we can interpret that as being excitement or being anxiety, or maybe a little bit of both. So there is that piece. The cool thing, though, and the coachable thing, I'm a coach, that works with doctors around stress and burnout, is that you can change your physiology by changing your thoughts. Because as you're changing your thoughts about things, you change your feelings, and your feelings do manifest as physiology in your body. Take, a simple example. Say you're somebody who hates Mondays. You love Sundays, you hate Mondays. And you wake up one day and you don't really know what day it is. So if you think it's Sunday, you're going to feel amazing. And if you think it's Monday, you're going to not feel so good. And it was a simple matter of thought. Like you woke up in the same bed, it's so there is that, and it's trainable and teachable.
It's Pavlovian feedback, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's operant. Well, we said we wouldn't talk about psychology, but it's operant conditioning, just like you said,
Right.
Pavlov's dog.
Right.
So,
Right.
and that is trainable. And actually, a lot of the more recent research about anxiety and kind of deregulating anxiety in your body is related to exactly that principle. That ring
I
the
have,
bell and you feel a certain way, or you know, you can train yourself to do it, or be coached on it.
yeah, I think that's something. I guess the training aspect.
Mm-hmm.
We, going back to the idea of being able to train your, when I talk about altering your physiology, what I'm kind of getting at there is that if we start focusing on, what is it that what kinds of things like start to make us feel good, and is there a way to, you know, way to get more of that and understand how that works. That to me is manipulating your physiology. A good example of that actually is so I have talked about this before, but I've had some interest in meditation, particularly transcendental meditation, and
Mm-hmm.
and it's not like a voodoo type thing. What it is it's sound science behind this stuff. And what you find is in people who meditate, do the transcendental meditation regularly, they have, they increase these beta waves,
Mm-hmm.
and in their prefrontal cortex. It's sort of the CEO of your brain, right? The wise part of your brain. And it really puts it in harmony, those beta waves, with the rest of the brain, creating this sense of, well-being. And so to me, that's sort of an example of that, which is, hey, we can hack this thing if we understand at the
Mm-hmm.
core of it that if we change our physiology, we can change our psychology. Well, how do we change our physiology then? And maybe that makes us more whole. And that gets to the point of what you were talking about, which is, I think, incredibly important and true, that during this striving for wealth, we have to remember that wealth is holistic in nature, that the what we're really trying to do is just, be content and happy with our life. Monetary fulfillment is part of that, but really, you can strive all you want, but if you're not getting happiness internally, you're going to have a problem later. You're never going to be quote unquote happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've got to be enjoying that process as you're going through it, because the moment that you succeed is just a very small part of what you're doing. You may you enjoying the planning and creating the wealth. Um, Once you get there, you're like, okay, well, that's great, I'm there, but you're probably not going to just sit there. You're going to want the next thing. That's human nature.
Right.
And the beautiful thing about that is if we recognize that there is that the striving for something is, they always say it's not the journey, it's the destination, and it sounds very pithy,
I think it's the opposite.
but but oh, sorry, other way. It's not the
It's
yes,
not the
sorry.
destination, it's the journey. Right.
It's not the destination, it's the
Right.
journey.
Right.
So yeah, even that, like, I can enjoy messing up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the deal is, and I appreciate what you're saying, because I was talking about changing your thoughts, because our thoughts are always running. So as long as our thoughts are always running, it's good to be able to manage them and change them to create this positive state which ends up changing your physiology. And part of what I teach too is meditation, because sometimes just shutting off your brain as much as you can, those thoughts, and just being in the present moment is of huge benefit. So I love what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. I remember actually, and it's funny because again, this is a show about wealth, and we're talking about this. This is all important. In fact, it's funny. People on my show all know who Robert Kiyosaki is. He's one of my influences, right? And so I
Yeah.
was talking to Robert last April, and he was telling me that he does transcendental meditation, it, and he was saying, yeah, it helps to turn off the monkey brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of the monkey brain that's sort of jumping around. And he says, it, in his words, it doesn't keep me from being an asshole. I can just see myself being an asshole from the outside, which I thought was pretty funny because I have certainly experienced that. You're like, oh man, listen to me. This is terrible. But,
Right.
but yeah, so when you have somebody who's experiencing that, the burnout, however we're defining that, which is clearly just sense of discontent, of this feeling that what am I doing? I'm not real happy and stuff. You've got multiple steps on and with your coaching program. Obviously you're not gonna be able to cure anybody who's got that problem on this show, but broadly speaking, how do you approach somebody who seems to have these issues?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. I just want to back up for a second and point out that burnout isn't just a feeling discontented. It's actually feeling there's three main components to it, because some
Mm-hmm.
people ask, like, well, am I burned out or am I just unhappy with my current
Yeah, that's a
situation?
good point. Okay.
Yeah, so burnout has three components that have been described by Christina Maslach, and those components. So somebody that's really burned out has like these three major components. So they have the part where they're feeling not as, like, they can't do their job as well. So they're feeling a sense of not being as efficient. So I definitely felt that when I was an anesthesiologist. I
Uh-huh.
was I was actually really good at my job, and I got a lot of um, good feedback about it. I had, my surgeons were requesting that I take care of their family members and stuff, even till the very end. But I didn't feel like I was doing a good job. So there's that.
Yeah.
There's emotional exhaustion, where you just feel like it's hard to get out of bed, it's hard to get stuff done. And I definitely had that as well. And then there's this other piece that is really important, and that's depersonalization. So you start to look at the people that you're serving, or the most of us that are these high achievers, we are serving someone, or we're leading someone. Maybe we're leading a team. You start to feel as though those people are like a burden on you.
Yeah.
So it's like it's it's not just malcontent. It's actually it's pretty severe and serious. It can actually lead to feeling depressed, and
Yeah.
you know it can be pretty
Yeah.
nasty. So, but getting on to how to help, there is definitely hope for it. i'm
Yeah.
i'm certainly a product of that. I'm 6 years out, and just on top of the world.
Oh, that's good.
And it's not just leaving your job. It's really starting to recognize that the things that you need to take care of yourself, and the things that you do are not going to fulfill you. It's who you are. So take that. And then how I
Right.
help doctors I look at those five components, and I teach connection to others, calming techniques, which are not meditation, but they're how to be calm and relaxed as you're going through your day. We learn about inspiration and find things that inspire us and nourish our spirits, and determine our purpose. Again, a lot of the docs that I work with, they go right back to practice once they realize what their purpose is in life. They kind of just lost it. Then we teach caring for your body, so taking care of your body, and then emotional fitness, which is diffusing negative emotions and cultivating positivity. So,
Right.
yeah, good stuff. So that's what I teach, so bottom line for your listeners out there, first realize that you need to take care of yourself as much as you can take care of others. As a matter of fact, your capacity to take care of others and to do your work is not going to serve you if you don't take care of yourself first. And then start to look for whatever lights you up, whatever makes you feel happy. Start there. And then I like quieting your mind, actually. So one of the things that I think is really important, because that mind can run, and that can be exhausting all by itself. That monkey mind can really exhaust you. So quieting your mind is really important.
So how can we, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, we'll certainly put the website into the show notes. But if you want to give us a website where we can, if someone wants to reach out and potentially talk about getting some feedback from you.
Sure. I'd love to help. I work primarily with doctors, but anyone that's listening, please reach out to me. I want to help you become your best self or direct you to how to do that. So you can reach me at www.dianeansariwin.com. That's DIANNEANSARI-WINN.com. You can also find me at the Physician Vitality Institute. That's www.physicianvitalityinstitute.com. And if you want to listen to more topics around this subject, you can listen to my podcast that Buck mentioned earlier, and that's the Doctor's Life podcast. You can find that on iTunes and Google Play and at www.thedoctorslifepodcast.com.
Important stuff, I think, to everybody who's really a hardworking professional out there. Diane, thanks so much for being on Wealth Formula Podcast today.
You are welcome. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Hopefully that was of use to you. Burnout is a topic that is not, maybe it's not so sexy compared to some of the, making money, getting rich stuff we talk about around here, but it's real, man. And I pretty much guarantee that there are people listening. Maybe it's not you, but there are people listening who just had oh man, I am totally burned out. I got to do something about this moment. And that's hopefully if I even, we touched one person, then that's great. So we got to do this once in a while because it's all about holistic wealth. Holistic wealth is not only about being, financially well off, but you got to actually enjoy your time here in life because you never know. You never know, man. You just never know when it's going to suddenly come to an end or something like that. You got to enjoy it. You got to be happy. You got to make sure that people around you are happy as well. Now, part of that being happy is a community, and I'll take that segue again and emphasizing that one of the most powerful things that we've done as a community is to have this Wealth Formula Network along with the bi-weekly mastermind calls. And you should definitely check that out. I think it's a tremendous value. Go to wealthformularoadmap.com. We'd love to have you on board for these conversations. And that is it for me this week. This is Buck Joffrey with Wealth Formula Podcast signing off.